Hello, I am Kishaylin Chetty from the Endangered Wildlife Trust. I am the Executive Head of Sustainability at the EWT, and I really want to try and help you understand what the implications of the US executive orders has had on conservation within Africa. So what does the US funding cut mean to conservation? Well, the impact is that there could potentially be job losses, and certainly, rangers, conservation scientists, a lot of the community members who work on conservation related projects could be directly affected. But more than that, the projects that are driving the conservation of endangered species such as rhinos, pangolins, wild dog, vultures, they are at risk in the context of conservation. And I think the systems that are driven by some of this funding. So the approaches to anti-poaching, how we address human-wildlife conflict, how we actually interact with a lot of the communities is all at risk as part of this process. So certainly this is required in terms of us being able to address the funding gap. From an Endangered Wildlife Trust perspective, I think what has been directly affected as a result of the cuts has been largely around our protection of vultures, the work that we do in the canine scent detection space, and then also the advocacy work that we play a role in specifically around environmental law in South Africa. A large part, and this is often what is unknown, is that a large part of South Africa's conservation work relies on international funding. So it's not just international funding from the US, but it's international funding from the European Union, from private partnerships that exist in the international space. And then also, there's a lot of multilateral institutional funding that supports conservation efforts across the African continent. So I think the greatest risk we face as the conservation sector as a result of the implications with the funding is that, it will have implications on job security. And certainly rangers are at risk, conservation scientists, community members who are involved in conservation related projects. Everyone faces those risks, but certainly as a conservation sector, we are trying to be resilient in this space and find opportunities to in some ways pivot away from that risk. I think what's really important in the context of conservation is that um, conservation plays a huge role in supporting the economies of communities within South Africa. So communities are heavily dependent on ecosystem services, and a lot of the work that we undertake as a conservation sector is to stabilize and enhance those ecosystem services to ensure sustainability within the landscapes within which people live. And so the dependence on those ecosystem services is absolutely critical towards maintaining livelihoods in South Africa. So I think with the funding gap that has arisen as a result of this process, what is really important is that as a conservation sector, we start to look at how do we diversify funding funding dependence and funding opportunities. And so our dependence on institutional funders and large governments, international governments, has to change. And so there are opportunities for better corporate partners to come on board and support people and support projects in the conservation space within South Africa. But equally, there's an opportunity for individuals to contribute as best as they can, either by supporting some of the fundraising initiatives that the conservation sector are putting forward, or where possible, donating themselves towards a particular cause. So, what has the US cuts meant for an organization like the Endangered Wildlife Trust? Well, as South Africans, I think we're all quite familiar with how resilience is embedded in our personalities, and I think as an organization, the EWT is very resilient. So one of the things that we have tried to do is we've looked at how can we diversify our opportunities around bringing in new funding, and how can we optimize those opportunities to continue to grow the, the, the different funding streams that we have in place already. So in a time like this, as South Africans, you can absolutely support the Endangered Wildlife Trust. Get onto our website, try and assist us in terms of donations. You can find some of the links on our social media. You can shop at Woolworths and certainly add us as a beneficiary on the My School card. You can shop at Trappers for your outdoor needs, and you can also drink Painted Wolf wines.